Philosophy as a Way of Life by Pierre Hadot reveals the ancient understanding of philosophy not as abstract theory, but as a practical path of self-transformation. The author shows how Socrates, the Stoics, and the Epicureans used philosophical teachings to cultivate character, overcome fears, and achieve inner freedom. This is a profound look at philosophy as a system of spiritual exercises, from meditative practices to the art of dialogue. It is worth reading for those who seek not just knowledge, but a way to live meaningfully and wisely. Interestingly, Hadot is one of the first modern philosophers to reintroduce the topic of spiritual exercises into academic discourse, inspiring a mass interest in Stoicism. Hadot himself practiced Stoic principles, such as morning reflections on death as a reminder of the value of each day. Part 1. Ancient Philosophy. Rule 2. Socrates and the Philosophical Way of Life. Socrates turned philosophy into a practice of daily self-knowledge through dialogues. His method of meutics, midwifery, helped interlocutors give birth to truth through leading questions rather than ready-made answers. The main principle, know thyself, implied constant work on becoming aware of one's motives and limitations. For example, a modern person can apply this approach by asking themselves daily questions. Why did I act this way? What values guide me? What do I take on faith without proof? Philosophy begins not with abstract theories, but with an honest dialogue with oneself. Rule 3. Plato, philosophy as conversion. Plato compared the philosophical path to the turning of the soul from the world of shadows to the light of truth. His cave is a metaphor for the practice of reevaluating values, where familiar social norms often turn out to be mere projections on a wall. The intellectual transformation technique suggests regularly questioning one's basic beliefs. For example, a manager who considers career advancement the main goal suddenly realizes that this is someone else's program imposed by society. This is the moment of conversion. Genuine philosophical practice requires the courage to step outside the comfort zone of thinking. Rule 4. Aristotle and the search for happiness. Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, happiness as flourishing, is based on the idea of the golden mean and the development of virtues. The gradual improvement practice. Daily train wisdom, courage, and moderation in small doses through concrete actions. For example, instead of trying to become brave all at once, a person starts small, expresses their opinion among friends, then at work, gradually expanding the zone of courage. Virtue is not an innate quality, but a skill honed like a craft. Rule 5. Epicurus and his garden. Epicurus turned philosophy into medicine for the soul, developing the tetrapharmakos, 4-part remedy for fears. The distinction of desires method. Divide needs into natural, necessary, food, shelter, natural, non-necessary, gastronomic delicacies, and unnatural, fam. For example, before buying an expensive phone, ask, does this satisfy a true need or social mimicry? Freedom is achieved through the realization that we need far less than we think. Rule 6. The Stoics' wisdom and practice. Stoic philosophy offers concrete exercises, morning meditations on the day ahead, evening review of events, the practice of premeditation of evils, premeditatio malorum, the separation of control technique, clearly distinguish what depends on us, our reactions, from what does not weather the opinions of others. For example, before an important meeting, instead of worrying about the outcome, focus on the quality of preparation, the only thing within your control. Calmness is not the absence of storms, but the ability to maintain clarity amidst them. Overall, conclusion for part 1, ancient philosophy is presented not as a museum of ideas, but as a workshop for remodeling consciousness. The main lesson of these chapters: wisdom is not information to be memorized, but a skill that requires the same regular training as sports or music. It is especially valuable that each school offers concrete practices from Socratic questioning to Stoic journaling that can be adapted to modern life. After this section, it becomes clear. A philosopher is not someone who has read many books, but someone who transforms thoughts into daily actions. Most importantly, realize 2,000 years ago, people faced the same fears and questions as we do today, meaning their methods still work. Part 2. Philosophical practices. Rule 7. Spiritual exercises in antiquity. Ancient philosophers developed a system of concrete practices for training the mind, similar to physical exercises. The double attention technique, simultaneously act in the world and observe one's reactions from the outside. This develops the ability to maintain inner freedom in any circumstances. For example, during a conflict at work, one can not only participate in the argument, but also mentally observe how anger arises in the body. This immediately reduces emotional involvement. Philosophical practice turns everyday life into a gymnasium for the spirit. Rule 8. Reading as a spiritual practice. Ancient reading was a slow, repetitive process of assimilating ideas with the whole being. The meditative reading method. Choose a small passage of text, read it aloud, then reflect on it throughout the day, noting how it manifests in life. For example, after reading in Marcus Aurelius, if anything external causes you distress, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment about it. One can track how this thought changes the reaction to everyday irritants. True philosophical literature is intended not for consumption, but for transformation. Rule 9. Writing and reflection. The philosophical journals of antiquity, like those of Marcus Aurelius, served as a tool for self-knowledge. The morning and evening pages practice. In the morning, record intentions for the day. In the evening, an analysis of what worked and where weaknesses appeared, without self-flagellation. For example, the entry, "Today I gave in to anger 3 times, but noticed it in time and took 3 deep breaths," develops awareness better than simple self-condemnation. Writing crystallizes the chaos of thoughts, turning it into material for work. Rule 10. Dialogue and self-knowledge. Socratic dialogue is not an argument, but a joint search for truth through questions. The philosophical interview technique. In a difficult situation, ask oneself, what would Socrates ask me now? Instead of searching for ready-made answers. For example, before an important decision, instead of anxiety, one can ask a series of questions. What do I truly want? What fears guide me? What would a wise friend say about this? The right questions are more important than ready answers. They change the point of view. Overall conclusion for part 2. These chapters transform philosophy from abstract reasoning into a set of concrete tools for everyday life. The main secret of ancient practices is their systematic nature. Just as physical exercises change the body through repetition, spiritual exercises restructure consciousness. It is especially valuable that all methods can be adapted to modernity, from meditative reading to philosophical journaling. After this part, it becomes clear. Philosophy is not something one believes in, but something one does. Most importantly, realized transformation does not happen through the passive assimilation of knowledge, but through the active application of these techniques in ordinary life situations. Part 3. Philosophy as a way of life. Rule 11. Philosophy and psychotherapy. Modern psychotherapy is rediscovering ancient techniques for working with consciousness. Cognitive behavioral therapy uses Stoic methods of managing thoughts, and Frankl's logotherapy develops ideas of finding meaning. The cognitive distancing practice, observe your thoughts as temporary psychological events, not absolute truths. For example, when the thought, "I am a failure," arises, one can tell oneself, "I notice that I have a thought about failure." This reduces its emotional charge. The best psychotherapeutic methods have philosophical roots. Rule 12. The return to practical philosophy. 20th century philosophical schools are reviving interest in the applied dimension of wisdom. The philosophical counseling technique helps solve life dilemmas through dialogue, not through ready-made recipes. It is important not to give advice, but to help the person find answers themselves. For example, instead of "you should get a divorce," a philosophical counselor will ask, "what values are important to you in a relationship?" True philosophy is always personalized. Rule 13, philosophy in everyday life. Ancient practices can be adapted to the modern rhythm. The micro-meditation method use short pauses during the day, waiting for an elevator, standing in line, for conscious breathing and returning to the present moment. Even 30 seconds of attention to breathing several times a day changes the quality of consciousness. For example, before an important call, take 3 conscious inhales and exhales. This reduces anxiety. Philosophical practice is possible in any conditions. Rule 14, philosophy as a path to wisdom. The final chapter unites all threads. Wisdom is not a final destination, but a way of traveling. The integral journal practice regularly record how philosophical ideas manifest in everyday experience, what resistance arises, what insights come. Example, note how the Stoic principle of separation of control was applied in a work situation today. Conclusion, philosophy becomes a way of life when it turns into continuous reflection and practice. The concluding sections of the book show how ancient wisdom can be relevant in the digital age. The main lesson, philosophical practice is not archaic, but an effective tool for solving modern problems. It is especially valuable that the author does not oppose philosophy to psychology, but shows their deep connection. After reading, it becomes clear. Wisdom is a skill that can be developed systematically, like a musical ear or physical fitness. Most importantly, realize philosophy as a way of life is accessible to everyone, here and now, without the need to go to the mountains or obtain an academic education. It begins with a simple question. How can I apply these ideas in my ordinary life today? This is such a wonderful book. I have compiled a separate list of all the important theses from this book, along with all the techniques and tools, and created a step-by-step action plan that you can immediately implement in your life. You can get all this in my community, Place of Power. There, you will find a detailed text analysis with similar lists for each book being reviewed. The community has already thoroughly analyzed and made available to you hundreds of world bestsellers, with a new analysis released every day. Follow the link in the description and use it.